Well, the Formula One world was put into a little bit of shock when Sebastian Vettel announced his retirement, leaving the Aston Martin seat wide open for someone to take. And the F1 world was even more shocked when Fernando Alonso took that second Aston Martin seat next to Lance Stroll, who obviously doesn't have a contract yet for 2023, but his dad owns the team, so he essentially has a contract. And then the F1 world was shook once more when after Alpine released a statement saying Oscar Piastri would be driving for him. Piastri just goes out and tweets out a statement saying he will not be driving for Alpine in 2023, and rumors make it seem like he will be heading to McLaren, who now has to figure out what they're doing with Daniel Ricciardo. There's a reason they call it silly season, but this year's silly season may just be sillier than any other silly season we've had in recent memory, at least in the last couple of years. It has been crazy. A lot of moving parts, a lot of seats still open for someone to come up from F2 and grab them, or maybe someone like a Nyck de Vries goes and grabs them who's not in Formula One, and there's also a bunch of room left for shuffle within the current Formula One roster. It's gonna be very interesting to see what happens. But we're gonna cover all the drama that's happening here. I'll make some predictions on who I think could go where, and what effect all this is going to have um, on next year's on the 2023 season. My name is Derek. You're watching Bleacher Brawls, and we're going to get right into this video on the F1 silly season. Well, it's definitely been crazy. I'll just start off here. It has been 110% crazy. Um, there's no other way to describe it. Now, we know Aston Martin have their two drivers set now with Fernando Alonso coming in and taking that seat. Lance Stroll will have the second seat. Boom, that's set. Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes should all have their two seats set. I say should. You never know if Lewis is going to retire, but it seems like Lewis is going to stay. So those top three teams look set. And then there's a lot of question marks everywhere else. I'm pretty sure every other team has an open seat. There's what, four teams that have openings for next season, and that doesn't include McLaren, who, if they bring in Piastri, you know, that's a changing. They have to get rid of Ricciardo or just pay him to not race. So there's a lot of interesting scenarios that can happen. We're gonna start off with the first breaking news, obviously, of it was that kicked everything off. Sebastian Vettel retiring. He said that he would like for Mick Schumacher to take a seat. He's been mentoring Mick, like Mick's dad Michael was mentored him. So I obviously the link there. However, it doesn't seem likely. We'll get to Mick in a little bit though. Then obviously Fernando Alonso just shocks the world and goes. It seemed like it came out of nowhere. Goes and takes that Aston Martin seat on a multi-year deal. And supposedly I've seen a couple rumors. The rumor I've seen is it's a 3-year deal with um where Alonso can get out of it after every season if he wants to. That's what I've seen. That's not confirmed though, but it's definitely multi-year. And now Oscar Piastri doesn't race for Alpine. That kicks a lot of stuff into motion. I'm gonna start with that with Piastri, the simplest one. It's a right starting point to start. McLaren seems very likely. It does 100% seem likely. He's not going to take a step down from where Alpine would be and go to Williams or an Alfa Romeo. Doesn't make sense. Haas, no, he's not going there. He's not. Aston Martin can't go there. So that's all the bottom four teams out. Now the top three teams are out. I might be missing a team. I might have missed a team there. But really, the only two options for Piastri are Alpine and McLaren, unless he goes Red Bull Junior and goes to AlphaTauri and Gasly goes to Alpine. But Gasly and Ocon hate each other. That's very unlikely. I don't see it happening. So the real two options for Piastri, are Alpine or McLaren, and it seems like that's the way it's trending. And I do think Piastri is going to drive for McLaren next year. I 100% think he will. So if that does happen, boom, boom, Lando and Piastri and McLaren, boom, set, done. but it leaves the Daniel Ricciardo question mark. And rumors are that he's talked to like 4 different teams. I saw that rumor somewhere. And obviously you figure Alpine and then the other 3 teams who could have openings. So Haas, Williams, and Alfa Romeo. I don't see. I feel like for Haas and Williams, 100%, he's going to be too expensive for them. They can't afford to pay him. Um, I know that Alfa Romeo doesn't make sense. AlphaTauri actually does also have an opening. Yuki is his contract's up. Um, but why would he go to AlphaTauri? That's just it's supposed to be the Red Bull Junior team. I know they call it the sister team, but no, it's the junior team. I mean, unless they don't feel right that one of their junior drivers in F2 is ready, which honestly I don't know if they are. Maybe they, and especially if Gasly does end up going to Alpine, then yeah, maybe Ricciardo makes sense on like a 1-year deal and he can see if he can regain his stock and maybe then try and move somewhere else after 2023, but that's very unlikely. To me, Ricciardo's has a couple options. He can either go back to Alpine, and he struggled in he was good with Alpine. That especially his last year with Alpine, and then the end of that year he was very good in 2019. I think it was, or was it 2020? It was 2020. 2021 with McLaren, he did struggle a little bit. He did get the race win, so everyone kind of remembers that, but he did struggle with McLaren a little bit. Now, and he's struggling with this new era of McLaren, but also Alpine still have all the data on Ricciardo from his time there when they were still Renault. Now, could he have burnt some bridges that can't be fixed? Maybe. But Alpine seemed like the most likely landing spot for Ricciardo. And McLaren are going to have to pay him to get rid of him because he still has 2023 on the deal, unless Ricciardo is willingly going to leave. Um, but his best option is to go to Alpine right beside Ocon and try and beat Ocon again. Ricciardo did beat Ocon at Renault when he was there, so that's obviously there's that option to go to Alpine. Next option, maybe just like don't race at all in 2023. Do kind of Fernando Alonso, maybe go somewhere else, maybe go to Formula E or something, or just maybe not race at all, and then hope in 2024 something opens up. But I don't see that happening. Or Ricciardo just says, you know what, F it, fine, I'll go to a Williams or a Haas or even if AlphaTauri that seat opens up, maybe I'll go there. I see that as very unlikely though. I think it's kind of Alpine or bust for Ricciardo. Now, if Ricciardo does go to Alpine, that means Gasly sticks to AlphaTauri. And I would guess Yuki Tsunoda does as well because he's part of kind of that. I wonder, and I do think he's part of the Honda deal. I would think he is part of Red Bull's Honda deal. That hey, because it's not technically the Honda engine; it's a Red Bull powertrain, but Honda's still kind of overseeing it. So, and Yuki is a Japanese driver, and Honda probably like to have Yuki there with Red Bull. That makes sense. Okay, cool. Makes sense. I get that. However, if Yuki doesn't stay, that does get very interesting. I'll get to that in a second, though, with the F2 drivers. However, the most interesting spot actually for me is if Ricciardo. I think there's only 2 options for AlphaTauri. Let's be honest. I don't think any of their junior drivers are ready. So I'll say 3 options. There's 3 options: is you stick with Gasly and Tsunoda, you let go of one of Gasly and Tsunoda, and you bring in a Ricciardo, or especially if it's Yuki who's the one leaving, maybe you try and get Felipe Drugovich, who isn't affiliated with any teams, especially if he wins F2. I know Theo Pourchaire is closing in on him, and Logan Seargant have a good year. Obviously, Pourchaire is in the Sauber Driving Academy, which is Alfa Romeo, and Logan Seargant is in the Williams Driver Academy. So there would be definitely obstacles to get those 2. So those 2 seem off the board. But Drugovich could be an option. I don't know if he's going to win F2, plus he's a little older for F2. I mean, it's not out of the question, but I think AlphaTauri's driver lineup is kind of set for next year, and I don't see it changing. Now, with that, here comes a very interesting one. Mick Schumacher. If Mick still gets that Haas drive for 2023, okay, whatever, cool, he gets it. That's fine. I think that lessens what potential ripple waves could happen. However, if Mick doesn't get that, and there are rumors maybe will Ferrari keep him in the driver program? Who knows? Things start to get interesting. And there's also, you have the rumors of, you know, Alfa Romeo, they really want to bring in Theo Pourchaire, and if he wins Formula 2, he can't go and do Formula 2 again. If he wins Formula 2 and passes Drugovich and wins Formula 2, they're in a sticky situation. Either they got to do the Piastri situation that Alpine just did with him, and sit Pourchaire, which after what just happened with Piastri, I wouldn't do that. So that means you kind of have to give Piastri Zhou Guanyu seat. And then what does that do for Zhou? He's got a couple options, and the two options would be Williams and Haas. Both teams seem like they're going to need financing, and especially Haas. If Mick is off the books, Mick probably does bring them some sponsor money, but also I'm pretty sure he does get Haas a discount on the engine, on the Ferrari engine, because he's part of the Ferrari Driver Academy. So it's like their deal. You give Mick a seat, and we'll give you a discount on the engine. Now, with that, if Mick's gone and he's also out of the Ferrari driver program, and Haas doesn't keep Mick, that seat's open. If Alfa Romeo desperately want Pourchaire in their seat and they're not willing to risk it, they cut ties with Zhou, and Zhou can go to Haas or Williams. Williams obviously have the open seat from Latifi. And what makes this interesting is Formula One is going to want to keep Zhou on the roster in a seat. Why? The Chinese Grand Prix is back on the calendar in 2023. Zhou is the first Chinese driver in F1 history. This year's his rookie year, obviously, but it's massive. That's a huge appeal in a massive market for Formula One. And have a Chinese driver to go to a Chinese Grand Prix and have a Chinese driver. That's huge. That'd be huge for Formula One. And if they can get that, and if Zhou has a seat, I think that's what Formula One wants. So I would see Zhou staying in Formula One regardless. Don't know if it'll be with Alfa Romeo, even though he's deserved that seat, but also to Theo Pourchaire. You don't want to risk a Piastri situation if you're Alfa Romeo. So I think that you might be willing to kick Zhou out the door to bring in Pourchaire. Now, Pourchaire doesn't win F2. I think he just sticks in F2 for another year, which keeps Zhou at Alfa Romeo. And then Haas either keep Mick or who the heck knows. Maybe Ricciardo could be an option, but they don't really have the money for it. So they're kind of limited unless they want to go and get another Ferrari person. And I know Giovinazzi's Ferrari's reserve driver. Maybe they look at bringing him in. Maybe it's Robert Schwartzman. Who knows what it could be? Also, I don't think Schwartzman's going to happen. I just don't see it. I think Haas, they're going to have to figure out if it's Mick or not, and they don't have many options besides Mick that they can afford. Now we're going to go to Williams. Latifi is very interesting. If Williams desperately need the money, Latifi is going to stay, unless the Zhou option does provide itself. However, if Williams are okay with their financial status, I don't honestly think a Ricciardo Albon pairing makes sense. However, if you bring in Logan Seargant, who's in your driver academy, and especially if he does well in F2, he did well against Piastri in F3 when they were in F3 together. You bring in Seargant, and he takes the second seat next to Albon. I think that could make a lot of sense. We'll see what he does for the rest of the F2 season, but I think that could make a lot of sense, especially if he, surprisingly jumps up and gets second place in F2, or who knows, maybe wins. You never know what could happen. I don't think he's going to win, but F2, but you never know. Crazy things have happened before. But he finishes in that top 3 in F2. He'll have enough, he should easily have enough super license points to get into F1 and drive for Williams. Do Williams want that? We'll see. The other option would be Nyck de Vries, bringing in de Vries. Won Formula 2 in 2019. I'm getting my years mixed up a little bit. Yeah, 2019 he won it. Still no F1 drive. He's Mercedes. Formula E driver. He won Formula E first time asking. I'm pretty sure he's Mercedes reserve driver. He is Mercedes reserve driver. But Toto Wolff has also came out and said he's not going to help de Vries get a seat. He can't do that. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. I thought Aston Martin would have been a good fit for De Vries, but they obviously got Alonso. So uh, very interesting. Also, De Vries could be a sneaky. We don't have anything else really option for Alpine. But I don't see it. So I feel like De Vries and Sargent. I do think De Vries and Sargent is going to be a fight between them for that last Williams seat. For that Williams seat. Now we're gonna go to Alfa Romeo and talk about Theo Pourchaire. Pourchaire. There's been a lot of rumors about Alfa Romeo wanting whatever. Here's what's interesting. He's a French driver, and I wonder, Daniel Ricciardo, I think if he doesn't go to Alpine, I think his next best option on the F1 grid is Alfa Romeo. And they could pair him and Bottas together, and, who knows what could happen with that. Now, obviously, that leaves Zhou. Zhou could go to Haas, and then Williams could still have De Vries or Sargent, whatever they pick. And then Mick, who knows about Mick. But then Alpine gets kind of stuck with, okay, our only options are Mick Schumacher, and Latifi's not happening. He's awful. No offense to Latifi fans. He's the GOAT. I know Latifi is the GOAT, but it's not happening. We know he's awful. And then it's really Theo Pourchaire is a French driver. Gasly won't happen because Gasly and Ocon hate each other, but Theo Pourchaire, anyone? If Alpine they lose Piastri, they still want a young driver. Nudge, nudge. Let's go do the same thing McLaren did to us with Piastri. Let's just do that same thing to Alfa Romeo with Pourchaire. That'd be very hypocritical because they're probably going to say a bunch of stuff about McLaren and yada, yada, yada. But if they're looking for the best option and to similar option to Piastri, makes the most sense to say, all right, we're going to get Pourchaire, especially if he wins F2. I know Drugovich could be an option. I just don't see it. Drugovich, I honestly don't think he's going to get a Formula 1 seat, even if he wins F2, which kind of sucks for him. But, it happened to De Vries. It's happened to a bunch of other guys. It happens sometimes, unfortunately. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what truly does happen. Now, last thing. The only thing that could really kick it into crazy what the hell is happening is if Lewis Hamilton retires. Because then De Vries to Mercedes, could that be an option? Ocon was a Mercedes reserve driver. I'm pretty sure he's also in their driver academy. Would Ocon try and make that step up to Mercedes? What the heck would happen if they're now and then there's just madness happening, but I don't think Lewis retires. I think he stays put. The only people I see staying put is those top 3 teams, 100%. I see Ocon staying put and Lando staying put. So that's 8 drivers there. See Kevin Magnussen and Bottas staying put. That's 10 drivers. Alonso and Stroll already set. That's 12 drivers. And the other 8 are question marks. Even if they're not massive question marks, I think they are question marks. Yuki and Gasly are still question marks. Not massive question marks, but they're still question marks. Schumacher and Latifi are question marks. Oh, Albon is set. So that's another one. But there's 6 drivers, I think, that are massive question marks. Ricciardo's a question mark. Obviously, Vettel's left the question mark because now is Aston Martin seat's taken. But that Alpine seat is now open where Alonso was. So I think that there's 6 or 7 seats that have question marks on them. Some question marks are bigger than others, but it's literally there's a reason they call it silly season, and this is why. This might be the silliest silly season we've seen recently. At least off the top of my head, I can't think of something like this where it's seems like one thing that's maybe happened earlier than we expected in Vettel retiring, but it wasn't something crazy, and then just at the snap of a finger in less than 24 hours, Alonso to Aston Martin, Piastri says no to Alpine, and stuff just starts kicking off, going crazy. And because we're right in the middle of the summer break, there's not much else to talk. There's no races to talk about. There's nothing. So all the silly season stuff is grabbing all the headlines, and it is crazy, 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 crazy. But it's what's happening. So yeah, it is crazy. Who knows what will happen? No one can really truly predict it. If you predict every single driver's seat for 2023 correctly, you're lucky. You can't or you have a time machine. No one's just gonna actually nail this spot on. There's so many possibilities, and it's super exciting, but also it brings up so many questions. But I think that's gonna wrap this one up. My final predictions. I have Ricciardo to Alpine, get that done, and Piastri to McLaren, and then I feel like Sargent gets the Williams seat. Williams is gonna want to go with their own driver instead of the Mercedes driver. And they already have Albon to fill the other seat. I think AlphaTauri stays the same. The only question mark is Mick. If I think the next only other true question mark seat wise is Mick. If Ricciardo goes to Alpine and it's the Williams seat, but like okay, that figures. If Ricciardo goes to Alpine, Piastri, McLaren, the only other options now besides the Williams seat that's kind of a question mark to me, obviously the Alfa Romeo seat, but I don't think that's a massive question mark unless Pourchaire wins F2, unless he does, which could happen. He's closed the gap to Drugovich. Now, Haas is interesting. Does Mick stay or Mick go? If Mick goes, it gets interesting. And also could open the door for Pourchaire to Alfa Romeo and Zhou to Haas. So those three, Mick, Zhou, and Pourchaire, are kind of in that circle of if one happens, if Mick stays, I'm guessing Zhou stays. However, if Mick goes and Pourchaire comes in, then Zhou kind of rotates to Haas maybe, and maybe Schumacher gets kicked out, or maybe Zhou could rotate to Williams. There's so many options that could happen within those kind of three teams. Those three teams are kind of the circle of what could happen. And I think those are going to be the most interesting things, because it's all reliant really on Pourchaire, I think. Because if Pourchaire goes to Alfa Romeo, now Zhou's available and all his sponsor money is available. And Haas and Williams would be fighting for that massively, I would think. Especially Haas. But then that means Mick is gone. And then at Williams, would Williams want to take Mick? Would they want to go for De Vries or Sargent? Could Mick find a seat somewhere else in F1? I don't know if he could, but if he could, where would that be? Would it be AlphaTauri if they're not impressed with, Tsunoda, or and also maybe because he's been with the Ferrari Academy forever, but maybe he goes to the Red Bull Academy and goes to AlphaTauri, and maybe it's Tsunoda and Mick, or Mick and Gasly, or maybe Gasly goes Gasly goes to Alpine, maybe Ricciardo doesn't have to. There's so many things that could happen. It's ridiculous. I'm not going to talk about it anymore because I could go on for hours and hours about different situations, different scenarios. I know this is already running a little long, probably very long. But yeah, there's so much craziness that can happen. It is truly crazy. I'm excited to see how it folds, how it comes out, and oh my gosh, it's going to create some drama between some teams. But that's it. Make sure to check out all the links in the description. The Bleacher Brawls podcast website, Instagram, and Twitter, plus all the crew's Twitters. Make sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. We have baseball videos all week, except for Tuesdays, and we are covering all other sports on Tuesdays, soccer, F1. We got a bunch. We're going to have some NFL videos coming out, just a whole slew of stuff. So NBA, NHL, we're going to cover it all. So, stay updated for that. That's going to wrap this thing up. My name is Derrik. Thanks for watching Bleacher Brawls, and I'll see you next time.